What happened at UCLA in April 2024 was not the result of spontaneous violence. It was the result of prolonged inaction, rising anti-Semitism, and a clear failure by both university administrators and law enforcement to protect a targeted minority group. For weeks leading up to the infamous night when a pro-Israel group attempted to dismantle the illegal Palestine Solidarity encampment, Jewish students and their allies had been sounding the alarm about harassment, threats, and outright violence being perpetrated against them, often in full public view and with impunity. The so-called encampments that had spread to universities nationwide may have been framed by their organizers as peaceful protests, but in many cases, including UCLA, they had taken a much darker turn. Jewish students reported being shouted down when walking to class, blocked from campus areas, and called slurs. Flyers with anti-Semitic rhetoric were circulating. Tensions only escalated further when Jewish students or visibly pro-Israel individuals were physically attacked. Among the most disturbing examples cited in broader national coverage was a Jewish girl at another U.S. campus who was reportedly stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flagpole, a story that circulated widely and resonated deeply within the Jewish community as emblematic of the unchecked violence being allowed to flourish. At UCLA, the encampment itself had become more than a protest. It was effectively an occupation of public university space, disrupting campus life and creating a hostile atmosphere for students who didn't toe the protest line. This would be unacceptable behavior from any group on campus, but the fact that it was directed at Jews and pro-Israel students made it especially alarming given the historical context of how anti-Semitic movements have escalated in the past when left unchecked. And yet, the university did nothing. Despite being fully aware of the tension and the harassment reports, they allowed the illegal encampment to remain. They allowed one group of students to intimidate another, and they tolerated the spread of hateful slogans and violence in the name of activism. This failure to act created a powder keg. Eventually, the pro-Israel students and their supporters, many of them Jewish, many of them American citizens sick of watching anti-Semitism be treated like a second-class form of hate, decided they had to take matters into their own hands. They made a public and clear declaration. If the encampment was not dismantled by a certain time, they would take action themselves. This wasn't a spontaneous mob. It was a defensive mobilization born out of desperation, after weeks of being ignored and harassed. The university had forfeited its responsibility to protect its Jewish students. The police had failed to enforce the law equally, and so the community stepped in. What happened next was a violent clash. But to understand why it happened, one must understand what led up to it. The encampment had become a flashpoint of unchecked extremism, and the pro-Israel group acted only after every other avenue for justice had failed. They did not arrive with the intent to brutalize, but to dismantle an illegal stronghold that had become a source of intimidation and fear. And the result? After the clash, only then, did the police finally move in and shut the encampment down. Only after the pro-Israel mobilization demonstrated that Jewish students would no longer sit back while being targeted, only after the university's continued inaction was exposed in the form of public unrest, did authorities finally do what should have been done weeks earlier. So yes, it was chaotic, it was messy, it was violent, but it was the inevitable outcome of an intolerable situation that had been tolerated for far too long. In this context, the actions of the pro-Israel group were not only understandable, they were necessary. When institutions fail to protect the vulnerable, it becomes a moral duty for communities to stand up and say, "Enough." That's what happened at UCLA. And in the end, the encampment came down. Justice was delayed, but it came.